All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim out here pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is the brother Chrono Watts from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And in this lesson, right, I ultimately want to touch on, just a few signs, right, that are happening, all over the world, man. We're in the time where, as the elder Taza Bob, man, said beautifully, this last Saturday at the camp, man. He said that we're in a time where, hey, there's so much happening. It's the easiest time, right, to be able to do a lesson a day because there's so much happening, right? Prophecy, right, is popping off of the pages, man, right? Standing right in front of us, every single day, man. There's something new that's going on, so really, hey, we're in beautiful times, as of right now, right? We're in beautiful times, man. Call all y'all Bashmel Shah, man, right? Prophecy is happening. So I got this right here in 2 Ezra 9:1. It says, he answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself. And this is what we do, right? We're commanded to be on our watch, and to look, as the scriptures say, to be circumspect, right? To look around and see what's going on, not only, in our city or state, our country, but, really all over the world, right? We look at these different, events, and different, meetings, right? The Davos summits and whatnot. And we watch these, these interviews and read these articles and ultimately, and again, filter these events and things that are happening and being said, right? Through the scriptures. Right, filter it through the scriptures, which ultimately helps us to identify the times that we are in, right? And we're at the end of the end, right? Really, at any moment now, right? Jacob's trouble can pop off, which we're already in the beginning of Jacob's trouble. But I'm talking about the peak, which is what the mandatory implementation of the RFID micro CHIP, man, right? The digital infrastructure is already set up, right? A lot of this digital technology is already in use, man. We're just waiting for, the chaos, right? Esau to bring the chaos or to cause the chaos, right? So he can come with what he calls a solution, which is the MO to the TV, right? The RFID micro CHIP, man. So we we in these times, right? It says, and when thou seest part of the signs past, which I've told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Right? When we see a part of these signs, man, and again, there's just a couple signs, that I ultimately want to get into, and show you, hey, man, things are popping off, man. It says, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time when the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Right? Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, and I want to stop right there, right? Because it says earthquakes, right? And I have right here on the Newsbreak app, I'm gonna click this one right here, which there was just two major earthquakes. I think one was, one was in California. It was like a 7.1, if I'm not mistaken, and then there was another recent one. I can't remember exactly where it was, but you can, look it up. It was like an 8.7 or 8.8. These are not small earthquakes, right? These are extremely large earthquakes that are happening, and then you have this one right here. It was yesterday, right? It says at least 1 dead and 29 injured in Turkey, right? Rocked by a 6.1 magnitude earthquake with emergency crews scouring through the rubble, man. And a 6.1 is not a weak earthquake, right? A weak earthquake would be like a 2.5 or lower, a 3 point lower. Those are considered weak earthquakes, but even then, right, those can still do damage, depending on where they're at. They can still do damage. So a 6.1 is pretty high up there, man. You know, it says one person has died and 29 others are injured, and that number is projected, right, to go up. You know, all these different earthquakes and whatnot that we've been seeing in these recent years, these last recent years, have taken out numbers, large numbers, right? So this number is projected to go up, man, you know, and I don't know necessarily how high, you know, I don't know where in Turkey it hit, but as you see right here, you got places that are turned to rubble, man, right? It says dozens of buildings collapsed and left emergency crews desperately scouring the debris to rescue those trapped after the first powerful tremor hit, right? It says after the first one, so you best believe they were hit, you know, with you know, the aftershock and whatnot. You know, it says, and you see the emergency crews scouring through the buildings, right? It says the quake hit around 8 p.m. It's at night, man, right? In the evening, right? So you best believe, man, it caught a lot of people off guard, right? It says within the initial shock left across several cities, including Istanbul and the tourist hotspot Izmir, which is over 100 miles away. Ooh, that's heavy, man. So they felt it 100 miles away, right? It says the epicenter was in the town of Sindurgi in the northwestern province of Balıkesir, where dozens of homes were reduced to rubble. It says at least 30 residents were pulled out from under shattered windows, panes, and smashed up brickwork among the debris. An elderly woman who, you know, 81, who was initially rescued alive, died shortly after being found, you know, most likely from her injuries, right? But let's go to this other article I do have right here. It says Guatemala, right? Guatemala rattled by a 5.9 magnitude earthquake, right? It says what to know. Hey, which this is prophecy, right? It's the scripture saying earthquakes in diverse places. That's Matthew the 24th chapter, you know? And this is in diverse places, right? This is different places in the world, man. You know? It says a 5.9 magnitude, and I don't want to play this damn video. And Salaki, man, this is not, you know, for any monetary gain, man. It's fair use, which I'll probably put the fair use disclaimer in the beginning, right? But it says a 5.9 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Guatemala on Saturday. The United States Geological Survey, it's like there. Geological Survey reported. It says there were no initial damage or injury reported immediately available. The quake hit about 62 miles from Champerico, Guatemala, according to the USGS map. It was the largest earthquake to strike along the Montegua Fault, which has seen a dozen similar seismic events over the last year, right? It says Newsweek has reached out to the USGS for comments via email during non-working hours on Saturday, so they're ultimately trying to basically get information, you know. It says Guatemala sits along active plate boundaries and fault systems that produce frequent earthquakes and landslides. Many communities are still coping with the human and infrastructure impacts of a series of quakes that struck the country in July, killing multiple people and leaving buildings damaged across several towns, according to the Associated Press. So this is coming after they had already been dealing with, you know, the aftermath of quakes from, you know, a month ago, 2 months ago, you know. So this is heavy, man. These are heavy signs, right, that we're in the absolute end, right? Major earthquakes, right, and they're happening back to back, same places, different places, all over, man. You know, as we're reading, right? Let's go back to 2nd Esdras 9, right? Verse 3, it says, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes, and we just touched on those earthquakes, right? That they're in diverse places, and they're not small, right? They're big earthquakes, you know? And it says what? In uproars of the people. And there's a 100,000, you know, person protest, you know, happening based over, you know, the Israel and Gaza situation, man. You know, 100,000 people, man, are protesting, you know, Israel, you know, leaving, you know, Gaza alone, man. You got a lot of these countries. I think Australia just came out and said that they're now going to recognize Palestine, right, as a state now, man. You know, they're going to recognize Palestine. You know? Or not a state. You know, as a country, man. You know? So, and Salaki, man, I got to pause in. You know, so you got uproars of the people happening all over the place, man. You know? Uproars of the people, earthquakes. You know? It says, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. Right, man? Right? Because we were told that the Lord was ultimately going to be visiting the earth, man. You know, let's grab this real quick, right? This is Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 6. It says, thou shalt be visited of the Lord Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushua of hosts, with thunder and with earthquake, right? Those earthquakes. It says, and great noise with storm and tempest. And there's been storms and hurricanes and whatnot that have been happening all over the world, man. You know, especially here in America, man. You know, but happening back to back, right? Flooding all over the world. You know, I remember watching a live stream of the brothers in New York, man, and they were talking about, you know, how at one point New York looked like it was flooded. It looked like it was like a lake or something, man. You know, all this flooding and storms and whatnot, torrential rain that's happening all over the place, right? You can look these things up, man. You know, it says with storm and tempest, and it says what? In flame of devouring fire. You got over 300,000 acres in California on fire, right? Over 100 and something thousand acres, over 130, I think 130,000 acres here in Arizona is up in flames as well, man. You know, matter of fact, let's see if we can find that. I think I had that. You know, I was looking at that earlier. No, let's see if we can find it. Come on now. Arizona. Boom. See if we can find it. Right here, Dragon Bravo, man. This is updated 2 days ago. 3 days ago. It says Dragon Bravo fire grows to over 140,000 acres in northern Arizona. Right? It says only 36% contained. 1,300 fire personnel out there, man. You know? So you got flames of devouring fire, earthquakes, right? Storm and tempest, right? These things are happening right now, man. You know, I also want to grab this sign, which is a major sign as well. You know, go back right here. It says what? The Sea of Galilee goes full Bible mode, man. Right? It says the Sea of Galilee just pulled a wild stunt. Locals leaked. It's like locals freaked out when the waters turned blood red, right? Instantly sparking end of days rumors. And we've been in the end of days, man. Right? Since Yahushua came on the scene, when Yahushua died, right? It was the beginning of the end of days, man. You know, and now we're at the end of days. You know? And a lot of different signs are happening, man. And they're happening back to back. Right? Back to back consistently, man. Right? Well, let's grab this precept real quick. You know, this is Revelations 16. And I'll start at verse 1. It says, and I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of the Most High upon the earth. Right? Drop it down. And here's the point, verse 4, right, to go with that article. It says, and the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. Right? So, hey, man, shit's happening quick. You know, and you got to keep your eyes peeled. You got to keep, you know, your spiritual head on a swivel, man. You know, Yahweh Bashem El Shai, man, is going to have things move a hell of a lot faster, you know, in the days to come. You know, Esau getting ready, right, to move in, right, martial law, you know, with especially, you know, him coming at the homeless and taking over Washington, D.C., which Lord right? I'll touch on a lesson on that, man. But him moving in, and taking over Washington D.C., moving in the National Guard, right? Martial law is being implemented right now as we speak, So shit about to move real fast, man, quickly. We could be out of here by the end of the year, Lord will, man. You never know, man. But you got to keep your head, your spiritual head on a swivel, man, and keep your eyes open, keep praying, because we in those days, But let me close out with this, man. In Luke, one of my favorite scriptures too, man, Luke 21 and verse 34, it says, "And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, so that a day come upon you unawares." Man, if you ain't paying attention, right, if you ain't watching, right, you're gonna get caught with you're gonna get caught with your pants down, man, caught lacking. You don't want to get caught lacking, because that means what? You're dead at that point. It says, for as a snare, meaning a trap, shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. It says, watch ye therefore, right? To watch, right? Be circumspect, right? It says, and pray always, and that's heavy. Always be in prayer. Even if you're throwing up a quick prayer to the Lord right in the middle of your day, open up your day, making a prayer to the Lord, which we should be doing, right? Starting the day off with a prayer. All right, when you wake up, man, rub the crust out your eyes, man, and throw up a prayer to the Lord, man. Throughout your day, man, make a little small prayers to the Lord, man. And then at the end of the day, man, make a prayer to the Lord. King David, ultimately he said, in the morning, right, in the afternoon and in the evening, you shall hear my voice. Right, roughly paraphrasing, man. Right, there was a Psalms 55. He was making a prayer to the Lord 3 times a day. Why can't we, right? It says that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. And that's the goal, man. Right? It's to make it to the end, to get the victory, to receive a crown from Yahweh's hand himself. But we gotta stay prayed up. We gotta keep watching, man. We're almost out of here. Keep the faith, keep watching, keep pushing, right? With that, I want to give all praise on the Lord to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushua, Bahashim, Rachak, Wadash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops of Great Millstone, the elders of Great Millstone, who were very well, very beautifully. Double salutations to the Akim out here pushing his gospel and truth and sincerity. Till next time, I say shalom.